The House voted overwhelmingly to pass the debt ceiling agreement, 314 to 117. It's in the hands of the Senate. Could be passed by the time you're listening to this. Some Republicans think the spending didn't go far enough. No shocker there. But Speaker McCarthy called it a first step. Projected the bill would reduce budget deficits by $1.5 trillion over the next decade. Some highlights: non-defense spending flat in 2024 at $704 billion, only increases 1% in 2025, and aims to limit federal budget growth to 1% for the next 6 years. Rescinds $30 billion in unspent COVID relief money. That seems logical. Fully funds medical care for veterans. That seems like a good idea. Reallocates $20 billion from the IRS over the next 2 years to put towards non-defense programs. That's that crazy idea to hire 80,000 or something IRS agents. Pauses on student loan repayments will now end in August. We've talked about that on the show. Biden's student loan forgiveness plan will be settled in the Supreme Court. Some stats on U.S. debt. Put up 2 charts here and then I'll get Freeberg's position because he's very passionate about this. U.S. annual surplus or deficits through end of year 2022. You see those great years. I think those are the Democratic.com Clinton years. You ran it up. Well done, Clinton. U.S. national debt, end of year 2022. My Lord. 32, getting close to 32 trillion. U.S. annual federal spending up at around, breaking 6 trillion a year. And tax revenue by deficit year. There you have it.
Go to that, the red chart. This is our national debt. This is a upside down hockey stick. So This is what's concerning about it is we're going exponential on this thing.
The problem with this, just to reframe it once again for the 100,000th time.
Wait a sec. Wait, this red chart, isn't this Freeberg's losses in Vegas this weekend? I think that's Freeberg. Oh no, that's our collective losses in Vegas this weekend.
I think we did the math. This group was accounted for 10 bips. 10 bips of Vegas's blackjack revenue for the year. So good job, everyone.
Good job. Everybody in Vegas has now completed their Q3 quarter targets early.
So the problem, obviously, with mounting debt is the interest payments on the debt cause you to take out more debt. And there's a tipping point where it becomes insurmountable. And there are many people sounding the alarm that we may be entering that point, that in order to fund the interest obligations on the debt, we need to take out more debt. And then there's more interest payments, and therefore there's more debt, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And so this chart I'm sharing here is actually from the federal government's GAO, the Government Accountability Office, which acts almost like an independent accounting and forecasting body, trying to provide some outlook on the fiscal condition of the federal government. And this is an analysis I think they put out a few weeks ago showing that as of the fiscal year 22, 8% of the overall federal budget was going towards interest spending. By fiscal year 25, it'll be 26%, and then net interest spending will need to grow to half of the budget. But if you go to the other
Sorry,
charts,
why don't you say the years? Because it's important to note what years they're talking about.
2051, 2096 is what they're showing.
This is a long window, yeah.
I get it, but let me show you this chart. Just pull up the first chart. So this is our federal government's interest payments per year.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is how much the government pays on interest for the debt. By the way, most of the debt is getting refinanced now at the higher interest rates because a lot of this debt was sitting in ZIRP era since 2008. But as the debt has to get refinanced and more debt is taken on to fund the interest payment obligations, the interest payment actually starts to mount more significantly. And that's what we've seen in the last 2 fiscal years in particular. Now, when you take this chart and you overlay how much we spend on defense, so here's defense spending. We are, I think as of this month or last month, now spending more. The federal government is spending more on interest payments on the federal debt than they are on national defense. Whether we believe we are spending money on national defense in a smart way or in an accountable way, or whether these are good strategic priorities and good strategic decisions, the fact remains that at some point here, our ability to actually fund the programs that we want to fund, whether they're Social Security, Medicare, or defense, the major cost outlays for the federal government, it's going to get further hindered and continually more hindered by the fact that these interest payments are climbing so significantly. And if you go to the third chart, I think it kind of provides the final point, which is Social Security. And we're very quickly seeing interest payments mount to the point of where Social Security spending lays. And when that happens, obviously, as you guys know, everyone talks about that as being the golden program. The right and the left, the Democrats and the Republicans simply will not touch Social Security from a policy perspective, from a getting elected perspective. But the economic and arithmetic reality is running up against them, which is that the interest payments on the debt are starting to threaten our ability to fund Social Security and Medicare. There's many more charts we could pull up to highlight this. The Republicans, in announcing the debt deal this week, made a lot of proclamations about it being a win and showed how we were able to reduce spending by $2 trillion. I think the statement they made, the deal cuts $2.1 trillion in spending over the 6-year life of the bill and $1.5 trillion in statutorily mandated savings over the next 2 years. $2.1 trillion over 6 years. Remember, we're talking about a $7 trillion per year budget. So that's $42 trillion over those 6 years. We're cutting $2 trillion of 42. So it's a 5% impact.
It's a start.
It's a start, but what leverage do they have now? And I think that
isn't it good news that there was consensus, Friedberg, that they actually did decide to make cuts? And that feels to me, and we did predict here that they would get this done. It does feel to me like this is some amount of progress, right? I mean, do you feel good about it or indifferent, Friedberg?
I think you guys know. I think that we have to tackle the structural problem of revenue, spending, interest rates. Those are like very big numbers that are challenging each other. Mm-hmm. Chipping away at the spending doesn't quite get us there. And it doesn't seem like there's a clear path here. Even the argument that RFK made when he came on our show, RFK Jr. made when he came on our show, that cutting military spending would have an impact. I mean, you guys see military spending is already starting to get overtaken by the interest payment spending. So does that really move the needle? I think it's going to be an economic reality that all programs are going to need to be cut back in order to fund the debt obligations, or we're going to see massive inflation.
But do you feel, I guess, my question was, do you feel like this was a good step or a good signal that maybe the government is and our representatives are getting the message that they need to make some cuts at some point?
I don't think that there's any way to provide the necessary fiscal security for the federal government without bipartisan unitary support around the objective, which is to get to a balanced budget and to reduce the overall debt and interest payment obligations. And if you can't start from that point, it's this push and pull over what programs get cut, but I want more money being spent. I want to have a pipeline.
Okay,
I want to
so
have
you're
this, all
not
that
super
stuff.
enthused by this. I thought it was a positive step, Chamath. You have talked about refinancing the debt, putting the 100-year trillion-dollar coin or whatever we wind up doing, refinancing this on a long arc, 50-year, 100-year arc. What does this debt ceiling reconciliation, or whatever we're going to call it, that they came to some sort of agreement here, signal to you? You predicted they would get through this pretty easily, so.
Yeah.
Boring. What do you think? Boring.
Nothing burger.
Nothing burger.
Move on. Nothing to see here.
Zach,
Let me ask you a question. Would you buy a 100-year bond from the federal government?
If I was a foreign government, yes.
What interest would you need to get paid on that to take that on?
Probably 1% to 2%.
1% to 2% for 100 years?
Yeah.
So it would be downside protection. You just feel like this is a secure place to put some amount of money.
This is how any country with a turbulent currency would make this decision. And you could actually get close to zero. I think that when we had ZIRP, you probably could have charged a negative interest rate because you would have effectively been charging countries, third world developing countries, even first world countries that just wanted a protective mechanism against their currency volatility. They would have probably paid you. Just like today, you can get BOJ debt that's negative yielding. So it's no longer negative, but it's still probably in the realm of 1.5%. It's nothing. If you just do the math, it's nothing. And this is why I don't understand why everybody just gets their underwear in a bunch here.
Okay. Non-gender underpants.
Put the red chart up there.
It's like nothing. It's a nothing.
It's a nothing.
It's a nothing.
It's a nothing.